But let's go back to, I think, what you were starting to talk about, this whole rise of manufacturing, even things, cutting edge things such as, semiconductor fabs, etc., being done in India. So let's talk about that,
Let's think about other basic things like the real estate cycle, right? Because for most humans, most individuals and families, house is the biggest expenditure of their lives. So if you just add up, the amount we spend on, or an average family spends on food, on clothing, and you multiply it, say, by 30 years, that number is still a fraction of what it will cost you to buy a house in Bombay. Right? And so when you do that, you're committing a lot of money. Yeah. And that's a very important part of expenditure.
Right.
Now, real estate construction in India has been stagnant to falling for nearly a decade. And now it's starting to turn. Right. So it should have turned in 2016, but then, RERA and demonetization forced another round of cleaning up.
Yeah.
2018 should have started, but then IL&FS went bust. 2020, it was supposed to have started when COVID hit. So it's already a cycle which is delayed by 5-6 years. So I think the next 4-5 years, and this is very important because in my view, this dragged down India's GDP growth by 1% a year for nearly a decade.
Right. Wow.
So as this cycle starts to normalize and turn, I think the opportunity size in terms of construction jobs, demand for construction materials, and general goodwill of getting into a bigger house, more productive house and all of that. And I think that will be very important. Now, coming to goods and services. So goods is a bit more detailed. So let me just focus on services.
Okay.
See, in the last 4 decades, we've created about 55 lakh software engineers in India. Right. I think this will double in the next 10 years.
Right.
Because the world needs a lot more software. Yeah. Even if ChatGPT starts doing it, I think the people who can use ChatGPT to write software much better will. So I don't think this is going to destroy too many jobs. I think just improve productivity. And there's no other place where you can get engineers, right? So Eastern Europe, demographically challenged. Yeah. No one wants to go to China. So in terms of large pool of engineers which are accessible, this is there. What has also happened on services is business services. 40% of the workforce of US-based consultants is now in India. So just as, when software was being disaggregated, right? So you take software requirements and deployments happen in the US, but the development and testing happens in India. This is the first 20-year process that we've been through. Now the process of consulting is being disaggregated, that you need people doing client-facing work there, but all the other presentation making, data crunching can happen in India. 40-45% of global banking work happens in India.
Right.
As I was telling you, there is a semiconductor fab which during the day is being run in Malta, at night is being run out of India.
Wow.
So what COVID has done, just like Y2K did for software, it has stress tested and accelerated the disaggregation of services and what can be done remotely.
Right.
So if you can do something sitting in Ohio or Iowa and your client is in New York, you can do it from Bangalore or Pune or Lucknow or Bhubaneswar, right? Yeah. So, and this number is growing already very rapidly, right? So it can be, I think, a very large number in the coming years. So on the good side, there are a few areas where, goods, I said $24-25 trillion global goods exports. There's a lot of double counting where people do small value adds and keep moving around. In India, our total exports are about $450 billion, right? So it's not even, it's like
2% of global exports.
Yeah, 1.8%. And it has grown up a bit in the last 2 years, but it's still very small. 24-25% of global goods exports is electronics. About $6 trillion.
Right.
In HS code 84, 85, that's whatever is included. In India, that number in 2018, or from India, that number was $8 billion. Right? So we were absolutely absent in this global trade. That number is now closer to 25, but there's still a rounding error. I think in the next 3-4 years, this will be over $100 billion. So India is now starting to participate in this value chain.
Right.
Some of it is a very natural spillover from China.
Correct.
Some of it because of China plus one. Some of it because the labor-intensive stuff now cannot be done in China. They're running out of workers.
Yeah.
And Vietnam and other countries cannot absorb because they don't have the scale.
Right.
Right? So a lot of it will happen to India, in India. And now the supply chains are also, and this is a process that Japan went through in the 60s, Korea went through in the 70s, Taiwan went through in the 80s, China in the last 2 decades. So this, India is now starting off on that path. So you start with assembly, then you start with phone assembly, then you start doing camera module assembly, battery module assembly, display module assembly. Then slowly the lenses start getting manufactured, the image sensors, so all of those things start happening. And it can be a very major driver of exports from India. Autos and auto components, the transition to EVs has meant that China is starting to really do dramatically well. And we need to latch on. We need get some lucky breaks there. But I think on auto components also, the companies that started off as Maruti indigenized its production.
Yeah.
Right, all the component suppliers are now starting to get global scale.
Right.
And as India's scale of car manufacturing just picks up, you will start seeing the Indian auto component makers starting to have more to invest in R&D,
Right.
starting to become more cutting edge. And any industry disruption is actually fascinating, very, very useful for them. On things like chemicals, which are another big area of global goods trade, there is India had a disadvantage in the cost of capital, cost of energy, and cost of compliance.
Right.
So even though our compliance norms in legal terms may have been very lax, meaning not legal terms, but the enforcement was very lax, there was a very natural enforcement because of the political reality. So if you went and told politicians that, look, Europe is really struggling with its cost of energy, there's a lot of business that can move to India, the first response would be, villagers complain. So what the political system was enforcing was a very high standard of compliance.
Correct.
And that, because China was not following that, so that was a disadvantage for Indian manufacturers. But as China has tightened it up, India's disadvantage is gone. Cost of energy, because Europe no longer has access to cheap Russian energy,
Right.
India's disadvantage is gone. And Indian companies have become bigger. So there are many sectors where, I tend to think of these things as bottom up. So there are many sectors where I think the competitive environment and the competitive positioning of Indian companies is far better than it was a decade back. So
Amazing.
Even on things like manufacturing, and with all of this infrastructure improvement, the fact that I think access to trained manpower is going to be a lot easier. I think all of these should mean that our share of global goods trade should also improve.
Outstanding, sir.